So the idea this week is to start telling you about what I've actually done to start running for something. Now, yesterday I kind of recorded myself rambling about it a little bit. I've cut that down into two separate pieces. One's going to tell you about my meeting with, or my basic steps in getting started, and then my meeting with State Senator Sarah Howard. Then in the second one, I plan to tell you a little bit more about my meeting with Crystal Rhodes and how I've kind of narrowed down the offices I'm potentially considering at this point. So watch this time. I'll tell you about Sarah Howard, and then we'll see you again on the other side. And next week we'll go into the meeting that I had with Crystal Rhodes, which should bring you up more or less to the present day. Here is my recollection of the early moments in Kevin Gibbs running for something. Let me explain what I've done so far. Now, I might not get to all of it in this one video. If not, then I'll split it up and I'll tell you another time the rest of the story. But I just wanted to kind of give you an overview of what I've done so far up to this point, so you know where I've come so far and where I'm going. So to start off, a couple weeks after the election probably, I had coffee with a friend of mine, and we were just talking politics. He had worked on a campaign, and I was feeling disheartened, so I wanted to talk all about it. And I brought up the fact that I figured that at some point in my life I'd eventually run for political office, and he encouraged me to try and run more immediately for some kind of local post. And I had never considered doing it so soon, but started warming up to the idea during our conversation. There happened to be a lady next to us who also encouraged me to try and run for something, and also told me that there was an OPPD board meeting coming up the next week that I could go sit on and see what I thought of it. So I took the advice and I went. And it was about as boring as you'd expect an OPPD board meeting to be, but it still was a really interesting experience. It was something that I hadn't done before. I got to see public commentary. I got to see these people who had been elected to this board as they tried their best to represent the people that they had been sent there to represent, and I came away with a lot of respect for the people who worked there. And I also came away with an understanding that I could do this. It would not be easy per se, but it was approachable. It was something that I felt like, maybe not OPPD necessarily, but that entering into local politics, if this is what it looks like, is not something that's outside of my realm of capability. And so I started asking around. I started talking to friends and family and trying to determine, is me doing this something that you would support or you think I'd be good at? And I received pretty much universal acclaim from the people that I know. They all encouraged me to go for it if I thought it was something I wanted to do. And so I started looking into it. That involved trying to contact a lot of people who would have some idea of what would be the best office for me to run for, what kind of things would they recommend for somebody who's just starting out. And so I reached out to a number of local politicians. I reached out to my city councilman, my state senator, and I went to a charity event for the Nebraska AIDS Project, which is a wonderful organization, by the way, called Night of a Thousand Stars. It's an annual event that they put on. And while I was there, I ran into a mayoral candidate, Heath Mello, who's running for mayor here in Omaha, and got to talk with him for a moment. And in that brief conversation, I just kind of posited out the same stuff that I've told you on these videos, that I'm trying to run for something, but I'm not entirely sure what yet, and asked him what he thought I would be well suited to given my background. And he theorized that running for a Douglas County Commissioner position might be up my alley in some way. I mean, I had heard of it before, but I hadn't really had my brain wrapped around what it does or what it entails. And I'm still learning more about it, but it does seem to be an interesting idea, is to run for a county commissioner position. So I've been looking into that. Since I met Heath Mello, I also had contacted my councilman. He got back to me and forwarded me on to the Douglas County Democratic Party head, Crystal Rhodes. That wasn't to say that the councilman didn't have anything that he himself could tell me. He just didn't feel like he was best suited to give me the ins and outs of how to run a campaign. He wished me well and said, this is somebody who I think would have more useful information for you than what I can provide. And so I appreciated that from him. I had heard back from my state senator, Sarah Howard, about meeting up with her, and that was a great opportunity. We got coffee and sat down and talked about my ambition to run for something and the history that she and her family have had running for public elected office here in Omaha. The Howards are notorious in this district for being the representatives of the neighborhood that I live in. People generally love them here, and I mean, I'm no exception to that. I'm a big fan of the Howards. They represent democratic ideals very well, and more than that, they represent people very well. And so I'm a very big fan of theirs. One thing that she kind of wanted to instill in me was the idea that know what you're getting yourself into. It's a lot of time and effort and commitment to run for an office like this. I mean, from the moment you announce that you're running, you're pretty much on a nonstop adventure to try and get yourself elected, and that's a lot of work on the ground, a lot of money that it can cost, a lot of scheduling and trying to make everything fit together, and that can be very difficult. So making sure that you have a steady social net of people who can support you in that, be it your family members, everybody from your particular spouse to your parents to your pets to your children to whoever you've got in your corner, make sure that they are there and willing to be a part of this for you, because you're going to need all the help you can get. But once you have decided that this is something you're going to do and you're in it, she's all about being the cheerleader, and so encourages people to get involved. You can do this when you really set your mind to it. And so I was very glad to hear her perspective on that, especially being somebody who similarly does not come from an enormously affluent family, just comes from a family that's been through a lot, that cares very deeply, especially about people who are frequently forgotten about. It's pushed her to legislate for things in juvenile justice reform, to substance abuse, to Access Nebraska, which is the Nebraska benefits program here. Although she's about to hit term limits, she's indicated that she might know who is going to take over in her stead in the next election, so I'm likely not going to run for that particular position. But her input was very welcome for whatever I end up running for. Okay, so the idea is we're going to stop right there for now. I'll bring you back in next week and take off from where I was on explaining steps I've taken so far. So thank you for watching, and until next week, thanks again.